have you been thinking a lot about education lately? Because I have.
Yeah, so I mean, you've produced educational content that has been seen by tens of millions. You developed a real knack for conveying concepts in a way that people find fun and engaging. And right now, there's so many families and parents who are struggling because their kids all got yanked out of school, and we're all wondering what the heck is next. So I would love to hear what you're thinking.
Well, I mean, can I ask you first? Like, I think that you probably have a pretty unique perspective on education, also on education policy that I probably don't have. And I have a lot of fear about what secondary education, or like what post-secondary education looks like right now. What do colleges and universities and community colleges look like? If we find that we cannot gather in the same way, and like, how do we interface with that, with the problems that creates? Because of course, education is like so fundamental to the foundation of like all of it, like all of society, all of innovation, all of like progress.
So post-secondary, many colleges have no choice but to try and reopen in September, because their finances are constructed such that if they were to not have a semester, they would go bankrupt and go out of existence. That's true for many, many schools, including some high-end schools. There are only a handful of schools that have these, big endowments. And even the schools with big endowments actually are operated in a way such that it would be ruinous for them to not have a fall semester. Now, the big question is, how can you charge what you're charging if all of it's online? And a lot of kids are struggling with this right now, where some kids who have a choice, which is not many of them, but are trying to defer because they're like, hell, if I'm going to have my first year of college be this online bullshit and spend $60,000 for the privilege of attending class in my jammies and whatnot, like they're not into that, which is understandable. But from the school's perspective, they're like, the show must go on, like the school must open. And like many things with the coronavirus, there have been problems building up in the system for decades, where our colleges have been doing a lesser and lesser job of actually educating people or preparing them for modern day life or the economy or society.
Especially per dollar spent,
Well, so here are the way the numbers work for these colleges. If you look at the cost of various things, most consumer goods have remained relatively stable in price. Books, electronics, clothes, it's like you don't see the prices going up to the moon. So what are the exceptions to that? The two big ones are healthcare and education, where healthcare just keeps getting racked up and up and up, just like higher prices to the moon. And colleges every year are like, hey, guess what? We're 4% more expensive, and then you like compound that, and college now costs 2.5 times what it cost even than when I went to college, or when you went to school. We're like both in our 40s, and we're probably not that far apart. So then if you're a kid, you're like, okay, I guess college is $50,000 or $60,000 now. Or you're a family, and then does that mean that I get paid more on the way out? No, turns out opportunity is completely stagnant, and I actually, if anything, I've gotten rid of a lot of them. So how the heck do I afford to go? I take out massive government loans, and the government's like, don't worry, we've got you. So now we're up to $1.6 trillion in school loans, and families feel like, well, I have no choice but to take it out because it's college, and my kid's got to go. The kid's like, well, clearly I'm going to college. And so then they get loaded up with this massive debt load. And from the college's perspective, they've been paid. They don't need to adjust particularly, and they just keep ratcheting up the price every year. So if you dig deeper and you say, well, why is college so expensive? Why is it that it has to go up in price? It's not professors. It's not even facilities, which most people would guess. It's non-academic administrators. The number of non-academic administrators in colleges have gone up 150% as prices have gone up. They just keep on hiring more administrators.
Yeah. So, and like a lot of the money is being spent on sales, basically. We're spending money to make money, and that's just increasing. And if you don't, I was watching a friend of mine go through this process. Her kid's going to college, and she was like, I got this huge booklet from this university in Alabama, but the University of Montana, I live in Montana. So the local university only sent us a tiny little pamphlet. And so I just don't feel like, and I'm like, no, don't go to the school that's spending all that money. They sent you $100 of material out of the blue chances are like 90% of those are not going to result in a sale or more than that. So like their customer acquisition cost is going to be astronomical. And that's what you as a student are paying for, to acquire new customers for the university. Go to the school that isn't spending money, like it's spending money on
bullshit,
teachers, not on sales, And so yeah, watching and people in academia have watched this happen, and they've been, comfortable the whole time, just watching as school has become closer and closer to not being worth it. And eventually you get to the point where it actually isn't worth it anymore. And for a lot of majors, I think you're already there, where unless you have a ton of money, you're not, it's not going to be worth it for you to go to school. It's not going to be worth the loans. And like, it's in the same way as healthcare. It's like so depressing because this is like one of the fields where it's like, this is supposed to be all about helping people. And like, it should be this like really great, good public service job. But like more and more professors kind of can't feel that way because of how much it costs.
They're lucky enough to become professors, man, because you have all of these PhDs who are in like the permanent postdoc adjunct hell where they're going to get paid subsistence and there's no future. And it's like, hey, tough luck. Like, we just keep minting PhDs and there are no jobs for you.
Yeah. And that's what's keeping the level of like how much professors are cost to university. That's what's keeping it level. Lots of professors, lots of tenured professors are making a ton of money, but on average it hasn't increased because you've got all these adjuncts and you've got all these people who are never going to get tenure and just like getting paid very, basic livings, or not even a full living.
Like the teaching of students is not the primary expense at a lot of these places. Let's put it that way. They're not exactly pouring the millions into making sure that your kid has some world-renowned expert teaching them. It's really immoral what's gone on, and it's in the guise of, like you said, like a public good and a nonprofit. In some cases, literally public institutions. We've really lost our way in so many respects. And education, healthcare, I think, are like the two that affect the most people that everyone can understand. The third one is housing. That's the other source of inflation, but it's not as extreme as healthcare and education. In some places it is,
but still a huge crisis.
Yeah. It's not as extreme in like where you are in Montana. Like there are certain metro areas where it's as extreme or more extreme.
What really frustrates me is I think that like there's no doubt in my mind, and I've always said this as somebody who sort of teaches through the internet. I've always said that like there is no replacement for the classroom, and like that's not what we're trying to do with Crash Course. We have no interest in that. And I believe that there's no replacement for the classroom, except that like now you have to.
Now you're replacing the classroom. There's like no choice because that kid's not going.
You must replace and so like you have to adjust that statement to say like, there's no system that is as good as the classroom, but there are other systems. And if you're going to charge $60,000 a year for the classroom, and other people can find ways to charge $6,000 a year for an education without the classroom, then you lose the classroom, which is the best way to teach people. But you do lose it, like you lost it anyway. And because we had to find a different way because it just cost too much money.
Yeah, this is the crisis that many universities are struggling with right now. Yeah. And I think that they're going to be able to bear it for one season, though a bunch of the marginal schools will close even now. It's like, just like if you look around the country, thousands of retailers are closing, thousands of theaters are closing, tens or hundreds of thousands of restaurants are closing. I'm sure hundreds of schools are closing. Not the big, wealthier ones or the major public ones. They can stand it for one season, but depending upon how long this drags on for, you're going to see more insolvent schools pretty quickly because a lot of families are going to look up and say, wait a minute, like this makes absolutely no sense for us to be paying this kind of tuition.
Do you have advice for kids who are graduating right now? I say kids, but they're, I mean, like getting like this was their last semester of college. So like, welcome to the job market. It's COVID.
Yeah. This is a very hard time to be looking for a job. That is for sure. And so a lot of it would be around trying to find any way in which you can contribute and develop that may or may not be in the field that you were thinking of. It might not pay what you want. The living situation might not be what you want. But just as long as you're growing at all professionally, you should feel good about it. Like, don't think, I like really want to get into politics, so I have to like make sure it's like the perfect job in that space. Like, no, just if you can find anyone that will give you a chance to lend a hand, just freaking go for it. And that's going to be hard too. Just like even that's easier said than done. So it would be about trying to find ways to make sure you're still developing in some respect, even if you're trapped at home for a while. Making schedules for yourself, like setting goals for yourself that are achievable, reaching out to people even when you don't feel like it, because it's very easy to become somewhat of a shut-in, I think, during this time for a lot of folks. But you have to continue to try and put yourself out there. I don't have great advice. One of the things I will say, though, is that if you have time, like you're in better shape, where like if you're a young person, you'll be able to have this be like an early bump in the road, but it's not going to define your whole journey. Like the people I'm the most concerned about are folks where, they spent 10 years working on some restaurant or bar, food truck that now is like completely kaput. That stuff breaks my heart because I'm like you, Hank. Like I love entrepreneurs. I love people who are actually trying to make something positive happen. And this crisis is going to do a number on entrepreneurs to a higher level than if you've got some corporate job that lets you work from home.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's so hard and so rewarding when it's working. But when it's not working, it's very hard to work through failure. And like not just while it's happening, but afterward. And I think that the important thing to know is like, one, hopefully everybody gets that like this is no one's fault. Well, I mean, that like your failure was not your fault in this circumstance. But and also that like that like one of the really great things about making your own project, investing in like taking your money and spending it on your dream instead of someone else's, is how much you learn. And you can take those skills other places, and management, bookkeeping, like entrepreneurs do everything. And so there's a lot like I think that they are good hires, and also there are other opportunities and other futures. And there's going to be a lot of need for entrepreneurs and innovation as we find new ways to operate, whether that's about coronavirus specifically, or if it's just about the world continuing to change. So we need people with those skill sets. We need people with broad skill sets who are curious and passionate and want to make the world better.
Thank you for listening in. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you did, please do subscribe to Yang Speaks and click on notifications so we can let you know every time we have a new episode.